Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. On this episode, host Jasmyne Peck speaks with Orphan Black Echo's creator and showrunner, Anna Fishko, about exploring identity and found families in her sci-fi thriller series. They also cover 4D printed body parts, what narratives Anna's drawn to, and much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, Jasmyne Peck in conversation with Anna Fishko.
My name is Jas Peck. I'm a writer and a WGA captain, and I'm here today with the awesome Anna Fishko. Anna is a writer, showrunner known for projects like Pieces of Her, Colony, and Fear the Walking Dead, and we're here to talk about Anna's latest project as the creator and showrunner of Orphan Black Echoes. Orphan Black Echoes is a sci-fi series set 37 years after the original Orphan Black, and it's airing right now on AMC, BBC America, and AMC+. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, good. I'm glad to have you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
If you could describe your Echoes journey in a word, what would the word be?
Long.
And why do you say that? Where did we start and where are we now?
Well, I have my youngest daughter is turning 5 in August, and when I pitched the show, I was 7 months pregnant with her.
Okay.
So it feels like it has been a long journey to get to the place that we're in now, where the show's airing. So it's been a lot of pushing the boulder up the hill. But I got there. I did it. It just took a long time.
You did it.
Yeah.
And why did you pick this boulder? What drew you to Orphan Black and the world of that series? I
think that, the original series was fun. Obviously, it had a really wonderful, devoted fan base, and there was sort of opportunity to do some interesting storytelling. So I'm not a huge, deep sci-fi person, but sometimes it allows you to talk about some interesting things that we feel and believe, and that we maybe haven't examined in quite the way we should, or know that we are thinking about things that way. So it's kind of fun to do something that has moments where it's trying to take on some more complicated ideas about, how we come to feel the way we do about ourselves.
Yeah, like identity, the idea of multiplicity of self is so evident and externalized through these characters, which is really cool. Were there any themes in particular that you were excited about tackling through a sci-fi lens?
Just this idea of kind of what makes us who we are, and whether or not it's our physical bodies or our sort of lived history, our relationships with other people, are the things that we've done, the sort of things that we will do, what really sort of defines us? Is it some kind of amalgamation of all those things? And I really got interested at a certain point in the show and the storytelling and this idea of could you replace someone that you'd lost? And if you had this kind of magical ability to recreate them exactly as they had been, would it feel the same? Would they be the same? Would you be the same? Would your relationship to them be the same? So that seemed worth thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea of how people staunch grief and navigate grief is really interesting, expertly explored in the show.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That was I wasn't necessarily setting out to do a show that was about grief, and it's not. It's got a lot of other really fun things that happen in it. It's also about love.
100%.
But there was this kind of moment where I really wanted to understand, so that this character Kira experiences this very tragic loss of her wife, and she also has this sort of technological ability to print organs, and so she sort of uses that tool to actually decide to print out her wife again, and I really loved this thought this person could be exactly the same in all of the ways that she had been successful. She had done what she set out to do, but the thing that she hadn't anticipated was that she had lived through this experience of losing her wife, and that she had changed, and that as much as she wanted to believe she could just snap her fingers and replace her, and she actually had the ability to do it, it wasn't ever going to be the same because she had actually changed. Kira herself had changed in this way that she hadn't reckoned with or dealt with in any way.
And the way that impacts like her family as well, the son that they have, Lucas and like the idea of inflicting trauma by deprivation of grief is also there.
Right. You
really
can't just skip
way.
over it, right? You can't just sort of deny people that process or that experience, or pretend it didn't happen. We could have done so much more about grief, but at a certain point, the network was sort of like, "Hey guys, like, it's supposed to be fun."
It's very fun. I find generational trauma to be extremely fun.
There you go. Yeah. Just
It's
sneak it in there underneath the fun car crash.
The core of the root of the best humor is generational trauma. If you pull the
every
chain
time.
up,
Yep, every
you're
time.
like, oh, there's my mom. And
Yeah.
then toss it back in the ocean.
Nothing more fun than that. Yeah.
I think, speaking of, the way that the characters are very impacted by the world of the first series, but also liberated from it, is like a balance that you have to strike very, very well in order to like pay tribute to the original fan base of that show, but also make it your own. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, it was a process, and it was definitely a challenge. It was a good challenge. It was complicated. I think when I first started, we didn't necessarily, the studio and the network didn't necessarily feel like the two worlds needed to be tied together. So the original version of the show, and part of why it took so long, was that they weren't actually directly connected. So the two shows didn't happen in the same world, and then they decided that was important and important to the fans, and so I sort of had to go back and reconstruct things to try and allow for that. But I still really wanted the new audience coming to the show not to feel lost and not to feel like they needed, because the original show is very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts and lore and legend and stuff that you need to know in order for it to make sense. And I didn't want the new audience for the new show to be sort of, put out by that if they hadn't watched all 5 seasons. So I tried to find ways to make the kind of core fans of that original show feel seen and give them some things that they could really sink their teeth into. We brought a couple of characters back who were very meaningful to them and to the show, which was really fun. And we took this character who was in all 5 seasons of the show, but as a child, and then we kind of, she's all grown up as a grown woman. And so there's ways to enter the show not really knowing anything, hopefully, and not feel alienated.
Yeah, the bringing back Felix was such a fun little treat for people that watched the original series, and like the relationship that Felix and Kira have is so beautiful, and they hold little secrets for each other in the best way. The way that a niece and an uncle have.
It was very sweet, and I think that fondness was nice to tap into, and the actors really enjoyed each other too, which was nice on set. And it was funny because Keely Hawes, who plays Kira, actually has a British accent naturally because she's British, and was doing a flat American accent, which she does very well. But then Jordan, who's Canadian, is doing this like really big British accent, and he has to stay in it all the time in order to get it kind of right on camera. That's part of his process. So they were very funny friends because they were sort of swapping accents, just hanging out.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
The idea of building this world, in Orphan Black is set in Canada, right?
Well, that's an interesting question. So the new show is set in Boston. The original show was sort of never specified. It was kind of a nameless American city. So it's not, even though it's quite clearly Canada to many people, it's not named as such. So I wanted to give the location a little bit more specificity. So we did shoot in Toronto for various reasons, but it doubles pretty well for Boston, and that's a place that it's a lot of medical technology, and it felt like a sort of university town, and it felt like a natural place for Kira to have put down roots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of little secrets, like what do you feel the role of a good secret is in storytelling?
It's interesting. They can work so many different ways. There are secrets that you're keeping from the audience that the characters know, and then there are secrets that the audience knows that the characters don't know. And they work different ways in the storytelling. And some people have mixed feelings about when you're keeping a secret from the audience. It's information that the characters have and must know and must at some point, would normally be talking about, but we don't see them talking about it. And so therefore it's a sort of secret to us. And then we reveal it, and that feels unfair. I don't know. It's interesting. It's sort of this idea of playing things open or playing them closed. I think they're good for tension. I think people do have secrets. I think that's real. I wanted for Kira's character, for her to be someone who was a complicated presence, who we loved, and she has a lot of warmth, and she's done a lot of good in the world, but she obviously does have this incredibly painful secret that she's living with, and we don't know what it is for a while, but we can see that it's kind of eating her up, and eventually, we present kind of the full story, the full version of that secret, and it kind of gets brought out into the open. And I wanted it to be this experience for the audience of learning it and maybe at first being horrified by it or shocked by it, but then if you really thought through her experience, and we sort of did this one episode that's all flashback episode in the middle of the season, that if you really lived through her experience, that you might actually change your mind about it. So you might kind of have this initial reaction where you're like, oh my God, how could she do that? But then if you experience her loss with her to some extent and understand what that relationship meant to her, and imagine if you were in her shoes, would you do the same thing? That you might actually understand why she made the choice at the very least, or maybe even imagine that you would do the same thing if you lost somebody that you loved in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone in the show, from Kira to Daros to Lucy, they all have like very justifiable reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
And I think that's what makes for a nice landscape of intrigue.
Yeah, I wanted everybody to have complicated motives. I think, especially in a show like this, it often becomes like power-hungry bad guys and good guys always fighting from a place of righteousness. And I thought, to the extent that it's possible in a show like this to try and make those a little messier and a little more complicated, it might be worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Lucy and Jules for a little bit, because they're such capital F fighters. And,
that's a nice way to describe them. I hadn't thought about that before.
They really scrap from a verbal sense to a physical sense. They can get down with the best of them, and I found that so interesting, given that their prime is a neuroscientist.
Right.
Where does the fighter come from for them and for Eleanor?
Yeah, it's this sort of manifestation of toughness, and I think female toughness portrayed on screen often comes out as like chicks toting guns, and I was interested in this idea of a if Eleanor is their prime, their sort of their origin, and she has this toughness. I think being an academic, being a female academic, being a very high level scientist requires a tremendous amount of persistence and toughness and dedication, and that also just being how she grew up and her relationship with a very tough mother who we see a little bit in a couple of episodes, played by the very wonderful Kathy Baker, who did me a very big solid and came and shot a couple of weeks in Canada.
She was awesome.
She was amazing. And I liked that idea of how would this toughness that could make that person successful sort of manifest in kind of these sort of same versions of her, but are not kind of striving in that way for that specific goal. So Lucy is striving and is on this journey to kind of create a life for herself. She's had to be very scrappy. She's had to live on the street. She doesn't know anyone. She doesn't have any resources. So that toughness kind of comes through maybe in a sort of survival instinct, which I think Eleanor kind of has also. And then for Jules, who kind of finds herself in a pretty cushy situation at first, I think it just becomes this personality. It's just kind of manifests as this personality trait that she kind of can't help, and it's how she defines herself in the world. It's sort of the thing about her, the one thing about herself that she feels in a weird way to be true is this kind of little teenage attitude version of Lucy and Eleanor. So it was fun to think about that stuff. It's complicated, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's very true. You highlight like a really good point about this idea of needing to be tough in various spheres, given the conditions of what's going on. And being a neuroscientist in a typically like male-dominated field is like a place that you do need to have a certain level of toughness to get through.
For sure.
Do you feel like you've had to be tough at all in your career?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's better now than it was when I started. But I think, it's still, when I walked into a meeting at some point of showrunners during the strike, there was probably, 150 people in that room, and you really have to like look around to see the other women. It's still pretty weighted in the other direction. So I think I was certainly the only woman in the room on the first few shows I did, or maybe one of two, and it's changed. But I think you do have to kind of fight to have a spot and fight to make yourself heard and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I think like the way that the show gives all of its characters personhood, but particularly the women at the center of the story is really a joy to watch.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I when I first came out, I sort of had this moment where I realized like, oh, there actually aren't that many shows on right now that are kind of occupying this space in terms of a sort of fun, colorful, like sci-fi experience, but that are also really a female-centric show. And it was nice. I got to have a mostly female writing room, and I hired a lot of female and queer directors, and so there was actually, and we had alternating DPs, and we had a female DP, and so there was one episode where I was behind the monitor, and I realized that it was like a female DP and a female director and a female writer who was on set for her episode, and me, and the non-writing EP who was there is also a woman, and I was like, this is really unusual and awesome. It feels really good.
Well, you've done it.
I know. But I had to sort of, I made everyone stop for a minute and like take a beat to appreciate it, because it's pretty unusual. So.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I another thing that's unusual and great about this show is how queer it is.
Yeah.
Why? Why so queer?
It's part of it has to do with like the legacy of the original show. I think that was obviously a very important piece of television for the queer audience at that time, just to see themselves represented on screen, and I wanted to honor that, and I think it's certainly important to the fans of the original show. So I wanted to make sure, it would be weird in a way to make another version of that show and just forget about that piece of the storytelling and why it was important. And then I just Yeah, I think it just made sense to me to represent that central relationship as a queer love story, because we sort of typically see these kind of heteronormative love stories and not really make a thing of it. You know what I mean? Not really make a sort of draw a big circle around, just how queer it was, but actually just to have it be who they were. Of course there are moments where we try and give it some context, but I think I also maybe wanted to believe in an optimistic way about 40-ish years in the future or something, that it could feel maybe more normalized than it does now.
I think that's part of what makes it so delightful to watch, is that everyone's kind of queer, but it's fine. No one's really batting an eye at it.
Right.
It's yeah. And it's such a source of joy for some of the lightest moments, or the moments of love in between those characters. So,
yeah. I think it was. I'm glad that I wanted to be intentional about the way we were telling that story, and I wanted to be sure to have queer women in the room, and we actually we sort of stopped at a certain point in the room process and had a whole kind of roundtable discussion with just a bunch of different people, so we could make sure we were getting a sort of positive and thoughtful point of view across about what queerness might be like in the future, and how to talk about that in the show, and so which was very useful and reinforcing and good. Yeah,
and hopefully 2052 does look and feel somewhat like that.
Yes, I hope so.
And printing organs would also be great, honestly. I think.
Well, they're not far away from that. That's actually the cool thing about that science, is that it's pretty real. It's pretty legit. So
almost there.
They are printing bladders.
Okay. All right.
So for some reason, I actually understand. So bladders are floppy, and they have an easier time printing organs that don't have to hold their structure, so don't have to hold shape. So bladders, which are kind of just like floppy sacks of tissue, essentially, are pretty close to possible now. So we had a whole time with this guy who's the head of the human bioprinting lab at Wake Forest, and he's sort of explained to us that they're already printing little mini hearts and little mini brains, but that these floppier organs, for lack of a better word, are easier for them to manifest. But so I think that's actually not that far away.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking forward to printed organs. That seems like.
I think it would be helpful.
I'm slightly worried about printed organs under the auspices of capitalism.
I know. I was like, this will be a good nonprofit. We'll make sure she's just doing good with these organs.
Yeah. Go ahead and print them, and then we can figure that out later.
Yeah, there's definitely the dystopian version of the show where she's selling the organs to the highest bidder.
I mean, someone in the show would love to do that. Yeah, I think. No, I know. Very much so. And is attempting to do something much worse. But still, all due respect to the technology. What else would you like a 2052 to feel like?
Oh, well, we're in such a tough moment right now. Right. I would just like it to feel better than now in any number of ways. I think I would like people to be kinder to each other, and to try and find some kind of common ground, and in this country in particular. But I mean that it's also very hot right now. The world is really warming up. Yes. I think that feels like something we could make a little improvements in. I think we did put a lot of we had quite a few CGI wind turbines. I think that's a vision for the future, and electric cars and all of that stuff. I mean, we're not so far. 2052 is not so far away. So I wanted to be mindful of not making it seem like everything was crazy different.
You can feel our reality in that reality.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, there's a very important Celine Dion through line.
Yes. Yeah, she gets a lot of love in the show.
I'm glad she still has a chokehold in 2052.
Yeah,
on
no,
all
she's
of society.
Yeah, she's a legend. I mean, now and forever, right?
Truly,
Yeah.
I mean, I would go see the hologram. Maybe
I know.
Slightly conflicted about it.
That was really one of the great joys of making the show was working with Reed Diamond around his Celine Dion performance and just his character's general love of Celine.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, he just embraced it with his whole heart, and it was the last day of shooting. For whatever reason that I cannot remember, we had to wait to shoot that scene where he's singing the song in the car. Until the very last day, and it was such a treat because he'd been waiting for this moment the whole season, and we finally he just really got to belt it out, and we were all dying. It was just so funny.
Just learning the song, practicing.
Oh yeah, he'd been singing it in the mirror, and he really went for it. It was great.
Yeah, his character is such a specific individual.
Yeah.
Very adamant, dedicated to his work.
Yeah. He's a funny character. I wanted to have fun with him. I feel like I didn't want him to just be a faceless goon.
Yeah.
I love goon banter. This is one of my secret loves in TV shows. I love kind of goon banter. I don't know that I'm any good at it, but it brings me a lot of joy. So if I felt like that was a way I could infuse fun into the show, because it was supposed to be fun, and I'm not super fun, but I was like, this will be a way for the show to be fun. We'll have some really weird goon banter that people may or may not understand.
Yeah, no, personally, I was into it.
Okay, cool.
I think it helps bring light into some moments where you're a little bit worried, you're a little bit concerned, but even the goons have backstories, people that they care about, things that they enjoy. So anytime something happens to anyone, someone succeeds, someone fails, someone gets hurt, you're a little you care for them, even if they're doing something that they shouldn't necessarily be doing.
No, not always. No, I'm glad. It just wanted to round out the edges in some fun, unexpected ways.
I liked Tom despite his actions. I was still how's he gonna listen to Celine?
I know. What's funny is that when I saw former President Trump's ear bandage recently, I was reminded of Tom. And
Tom got it way worse.
Tom got it definitely way worse. But it's funny because those ear bandages are actually quite. I I understand why this looks a little goofy, because ear bandages are tricky to apply.
You're been there.
Great. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, Tom and I were there. Reed and I were definitely trying on different ear bandages, being which one looks the least stupid? But they all look pretty dumb. So
no, it looked exactly the right amount
of goofy.
For Tom.
Right.
I was that checks out. That is appropriate.
Oh, good.
Yeah. The effects in the show, when he got out of the car and his little ear just popped in his hand like that.
I know.
I was
oh.
Because it felt so real. And I read an interview where you were talking about picking pinkness of goop.
Goo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. How did you navigate all of these textures and choices in building this world?
I think in the end you just kind of have to go with your instinct. You're sort of often in a situation where you don't have a tremendous amount of time to really ponder some of those choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think input is important, and trusting the people you're working with is important. But yeah, they brought 5 shades of pink goo that was going to be the printer goo. It's a nutrient bath. Just for, to be technical about it. And
in that it was healthy to be?
No. So they actually, the part of the story is that they do use, when they're printing tissue, which they do, it gets printed in a pink kind of nutrient bath substance. So that's actually real. It's not quite as pink in real life as I went, because we wanted it to kind of like be a bit more vivid given the tone and the palette of the show. And so, yeah, somebody brought me 6 different samples of pink goo and asked me which pink I preferred, and I went with that one.
Yeah, that's a hot one.
Yeah, it's pretty hot. There were hotter ones. There were like more poppy ones that I felt like were too much.
You can't go overboard.
No, I didn't feel like we wanted it to seem kind of like they've actually made a kids slime for the show, and this company Slumu has manufactured a special glitter slime, Orphan Black Echoes glitter slime, that's really all the way pink. That's a little too far for me, but my kids love it. So
okay, that's excellent. Did you get like a vat of it?
Yeah, I have a lot of it in my house that I might, I let them play with it outside.
Yeah. Outside seems like the spot for the goop. Yep. And is it enough where like they can get in and then
no.
Okay.
No. It's just like it comes in a jar. That would really I would have a stroke. Yeah.
Bathtub it and be like,
nope.
Okay.
No, that's not my. Yeah, I'm not into the messy crafts. That's not my thing.
It's
but
for the best.
I have other skills as a parent.
Mini.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah. That's not my forte. But those choices are fun. My favorite are the animal ones. I love the animal wrangler meetings. Those are my favorite. When the animal wrangler comes and he's like, "What would you like?" And I'm like, "What can I have?" And he's like, "Well, I got 5 tortoises and an emu." And you're like, "Ooh, what is an emu?" And then you look at pictures, and then they bring you these amazing animals and they hang out, and it makes everybody happy on set, I think, often too, unless the animals are really sort of bad at their jobs, which does occasionally happen and has happened to me with a dog once. But we had a great dog. We had a really
important dog.
Yeah,
really good dog.
Really good dog. And in general, I think the animals bring joy to especially when everybody's working hard. And so yeah, those are my favorite meetings that I know nothing about but get to weigh in on.
Did you audition dogs?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. That's so great, where they bring you like 4 different dogs and you get to stand in the parking lot being like, I don't know, what can the dogs do? And they show you what the dogs can do, and the dogs are so sweet and cute, and you think about what kind of dog the person might have. And anyway, it was interesting. The dog we ended up with, interestingly, is a deaf dog.
Okay.
And that in part why the dog is so great at being on set is because it doesn't ever get distracted by sounds.
Sure.
So
yeah.
it's very focused on its handler. Anyway, so see, you learn things you don't know. Really
That's
important
awesome.
things. Yeah.
Good for him. Also, like less stimuli to be like bothered by.
Yeah.
Fireworks.
Dogs just chill. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Let's circle back to something that you mentioned a second ago, which is parenthood.
Yeah.
And how like parenthood factors into the show in so many ways. The idea of like building family, chosen family.
Yeah.
And particularly the family that Lucy, Jules, and Eleanor find with each other. How did you go about constructing those relationships to explore those themes?
Yeah, it was interesting to. We talked a lot about that in the room. Like, would this feel more like sisters finding each other? Would it feel more like parents? There's just sort of an interesting combination of kind of parent-child dynamic and also sibling dynamic. And I think in the end, just how the sort of closer they were in age, the more it felt like a sibling dynamic. So there's some really great scenes with Eleanor and Jules that really feel more like kind of parent-child-ish in direction. And then there are some scenes with Lucy and Jules that feel more like older sibling, younger sibling kind of bickery, and Eleanor and Lucy kind of also sort of similarly kind of more in the sibling zone. But then, it raises all these interesting questions of like, are you proud of the things that your older self has accomplished? Do you resent that person for making you feel like you need to do a certain thing a certain way? Or do you feel like they've made the right choices, or do you want to tell your younger self not to do the things that you did, not to become the person that you became? And I think there's still so much more to explore, because we don't really bring all three of the characters together until really the middle of the season, and there's so much going on. So so at a certain point I was sort of like, oh, I feel like I wanted more of those scenes. I want more time for those kind of intimate moments between them, but it was a little hard to find. But I think ultimately they feel very loving and protective towards each other, like a family. And I think especially for Lucy, that sense of family becomes very important, and she sort of feels pushed between or pulled between that new family that she's discovered, which is really her, and then these relationships that she's developed with Jack and Charlie, which are also very important to her. So, yeah.
If the tech existed, would you print yourself, or would you print someone else?
I would not print myself.
You're like,
No.
one is enough.
I feel like, I don't know. I don't think I would print myself. I feel like I would love to print, family members that I've lost, or didn't really get to know. I think there's this, there's a character, and I think we can't talk too much about her story because that gives a little bit away. But this idea of being able to print somebody who you never really got to know because you lost them before you really got to develop a relationship with them is very seductive. That seems like it could be I don't know. There's definitely, some of my grandparents passed away when I was very young, and I would have been thinking a lot about, getting to know them better would have been interesting.
Yeah, that threw me for a loop, the moment that you're talking about. And I will just say that even the most innocent seeming individual in this show can do the darkest thing, and the most villainous seeming individual can have like the softest touch at times. So
a little lightness.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, I don't think I would print myself either. I would probably print like my great grandma.
Ooh.
Yeah, she seemed cool.
Yeah.
From my grandma's stories about her.
Yeah.
So I'd want to know like what was going on there.
Yeah, it's sort of like a different version of time travel in a way, which we talked about a bit, where you're not actually going back to see them, but you're kind of bringing them forward, I guess, but also in a different way, because they might or might not know who they are. It would be helpful if they knew who they were.
Which, to that point, the way that memory is used in the show is so interesting, and I don't think that I have seen cloning work like that before, where they actually possess an intimate knowledge, or have the ability to possess a knowledge of who they are. And the way that they have access to memory, what memories they have access to and when, has such an impact on how they're able to navigate in the story. How did you go about?
Yeah, I mean, we just did a little bit of sort of research about, we had actually Amy Johnson, one of the producers on the show and the writers, has a background in psychology, and so she had also worked with veterans and PTSD, people who struggle with PTSD and memory loss, and so we talked a lot about like difference between different kinds of memory and experiential memory, and then the kind of memory of sense of self and stuff like that. And so we sort of fudged a bit this idea that there might be certain types of memory, this kind of idea of experiential memory, that you might be more challenging to reproduce in the printout, given the level of detail in the scan, and it took a little while to figure that out. But then, at a certain point, I think we really wanted the printing process and the result. So in the case of Eleanor, the new version of Eleanor, to be kind of really identical to the person that Kira had lost. And so Jules and Lucy kind of suffer from this memory loss because they were printed a little earlier and from different older scans. But I think the thought experiment of, is this the same person, really kind of feels the most impactful when the printout is really just literally the same. There's just actually no technical detail different about her. So so we had this kind of different, she presents a different case, and any printouts going forward will probably also work in the same way. So
talk to me a little bit about like your room process. What kind of writers do you like to work with?
Nice, friendly ones.
Important. Very important.
Yeah, I mean, I liked, I loved my room so much. I was so lucky to have everyone, and I felt very sort of supported by them, and so happy to go to work, even though we were on Zoom every day. I was not Zoom would not have been my choice. It was not really, there was no alternative offered to me in that moment because we were still kind of in the COVID-y times. And so we did it on Zoom, but that allowed me to hire these two writers who live in New York, which was really wonderful. And so I'm grateful in that way because I wouldn't necessarily have gotten to hire them otherwise. So they were delights. I don't like to overwork especially on Zoom. I think it's draining to be on there for really, really long stretches of time. I also think, there's many ways to tell a story, and at a certain point you got to just pick one and keep going, especially in a show like this that's plot heavy, and if you go back and start undoing things and decisions that you've already made, the whole thing starts to fall apart, and it's precarious in that way. So I felt protective of that in the sense that I wanted to kind of make a decision and then keep going, and give everybody time to write. So we didn't work super long hours, which I think is important. I like to hire writers who have different things that they're bringing to the table. People who have, I hired 2 playwrights, and then I hired someone I had worked with on Fear the Walking Dead for a long time, who's really a bigger horror genre person than I am, and I'm that's not saying much, but who really has that skill set and that knowledge and background of work. And so I like to have a lot of different kind of points of view and different. I mean, it was great to have Amy in particular because she had this psychology background, and we were talking about memory and talking about Alzheimer's, and then just I think the one thing I wanted was for everybody to have a really good sense of character, because that's so important to me, and that's what I care about most when I'm watching something, is has somebody stopped to do the work to make me care about this person, and they all do that very well. So yeah.
And now that the show is out in the world, how are you looking for audiences to engage with it?
You mean, what do I want them to think when they're watching it?
How do you want people to feel?
I think I want people to enjoy it. I think it's not, it has moments where it's trying to do like slightly more complicated work, but in general, it should be fun. It's hopefully fun without being too goofy. That's a difficult line to walk. I wanted people to care about those women and to feel some joy and love around them, and to laugh a little bit and kind of enjoy the ride. It's not which is, I think, how people engaged with the original show. It's different. It has a different feel than the original does, and at a certain point I had to own that. I think there was a lot of conversations and a lot of pressure to try and make something that captured what it was that everybody responded to about the original show with such fervor, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what that was and how I could, and then at a certain point I was like, I have to do what I can do here, and it's not going to be the same. And if I try and make it exactly the same, it's never going to feel right to me or to anybody else. So it's just going to have to kind of be the version of this that I'm capable of. And so that was a tough process. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you definitely achieved what you set out to
Oh,
accomplish.
thank you. That's
it
nice.
Stands very, very well on its own.
Thank you.
And it elicits like exactly the sort of ride that you want when you're on a journey like that. It has its highs, it has its lows, but it doesn't have a moment of like disengagement.
Oh, good.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Key.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, my pleasure.
Appreciate the time.
No, it was really nice to talk to you.
Will you be able to take a nap after? Or?
No, definitely not.
Okay,
no.
got it.
No, there's no napping.
There's no napping.
No, I'll just
It's
go to bed at 8:30.
It's just
it's
slime.
fine. Yeah,
waiting at home.
Slime and hungry children. And
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. And see you next time.